This is a rubbish cutting board. Just look at this. It doesn't cut at all, it just squishes. Let's make a cutting board that actually cuts. For this build I'm using wood from this 2x6, leather from scrap pieces, and metal from these knives. I'm specifying this because this is my entry to Make What You Fear, the challenge hosted by the Working Hands podcast. The only restriction for this challenge is to use 3 different raw materials. Some purists might claim that I didn't make the knives, but I say that I will modify them enough to consider them a raw material. I mean, I didn't chop down the tree or dimension of wood, and that's clearly a raw material. Okay, that might be a bad example, since it was my father who did both the cutting and the sawing. This piece is left over from the garage pergola build from last summer, the leather is scraps I got somewhere, and the knives are thrift store finds, so I guess all the materials are second hand. The challenge is called Make What You Fear, as in to try something you haven't before. And I have definitely never made something like this. I wouldn't remember that. And at the same time, knives are the only tool in the workshop that I actually fear, because they're the only ones that have tasted my blood. I have good relationships with my angle grinders and circular saw, and a healthy respect for both my table saw and palm router. But knives, that's a different story. A part might be that I didn't grow up in a knife enthusiastic family. My dad, for instance, who spent his working life as a farmer, never carried a knife. What he had on him at all times was a worn down flathead screwdriver that he used for anything. Like a Duresta ice pick. If he needed to cut something, he was more likely to grab an axe. And when my oldest kid got his first knife a couple of years ago, he had it for only about an hour before he cut open the index knuckle on his left hand so badly that he needed stitches. To calm him down, both me and my father showed him the scars we had from our first knife. At this point, my wife questioned the decision of getting him the knife, but the scar on his hand was a great help for him to learn left and right, so some good came out of it. Now we're coming up to the low point of the project. I dreaded this cut for far too long, and when I finally did it, I forgot to lock the fence. You can actually see the fence move in the footage. So the first cut is a bit wider than the others, because the blade wandered. Then I decided to cut the length down to make it more balanced, and that wasn't a disaster, but when I went to glue it up, I used far too little glue. But I think I managed to sort it out in the end. The Working Hands podcast is a great maker podcast hosted by Tony from Woodline Iron and Keith from Blackstone Concepts. Podcasts are really my favorite way to keep up to date with the maker community, because I seldom find time to watch as much YouTube as I would like, and the Instagram feed is less than ideal. Everyone should have a podcast really, and with remote recording, it's a great way to stay in touch since the maker community is so widespread. And while we're on the topic of podcasts, I feel I have to mention Make Crude Mistakes, the maker podcast I co-host with Håvar from Behind the Mistakes and Phil from Phil Makes Things. If you need company in the workshop or on a long drive or just doing the dishes, we're happy to fill your ear holes with some maker content. The idea for this build actually came to me during a podcast recording a while back. I don't recall what episode or the topic that spawned it, but I remember mentioning it in passing and then going a bit quiet while I was writing it down and pondering if it was a viable idea. Then that idea sat percolating for a couple of months until I started thinking about the Make What You Fear challenge. Because when I went through my project list, this was the only project that could use 3 materials without forcing it. I might be in a mono materials phase. To be perfectly honest, the challenge made the project better, because the first iterations didn't have any knife sheets to protect not the blades, but the rest of the world from them. It didn't take much handling of the board to realize that some kind of blade guards were very much needed. That's a good thing with challenges, it gives you limitations to adhere to, and limits the white paper effect. Sometimes a nicely sized box is just what you need to stay inside. So here it is all together. Let's see what we can cut. Banana. Cucumber. Carrot. Hot dog. Sausage. Thank you, Keith and Tony, for setting up the challenge. Check out the podcast if you don't know about it. All the other participants can be found on our Instagram under the hashtag MWYF5. Thank you very much for watching, and have a nice whatever you're having. Well, I guess that's my lunch sorted.